And more to your point about all of this, I wanted to ask, as we move forward, because the conflict is escalating, they're already talking openly in the West about, number one, wanting regime change in Russia. Number two, they're talking about nuclear annihilation or limited use of nuclear weapons. What is the atmosphere or mood when you were visiting Moscow, and then when you were also in Eastern Ukraine? What are other people saying that are living day to day that, maybe not necessarily even that are politicians or journalists, but just people living in this reality? What is the mood and what are the thoughts happening?
Well, I mean, in Donbass itself, of course, the mood was one of jubilation and relief, because for them, as many of them described to me, and I'm sure Wyatt will say the same thing, many of them perceive Russia as the motherland, and as many of them said to me, here, Russia is now protecting its children. It can now protect its children. And I think this is another important point to make, at least in Donetsk. I didn't see any Russian soldiers. When people talk about the occupation of the Donbass and people being coerced to vote at gunpoint, the soldiers that were there were from the DPR, the Donetsk People's Republic National Defense, and the LPR, the Lugansk People's Republic National Defense, right? Those were the only soldiers I saw. And of course they were there. Why? Because the SBU has agents inside the Donbass. It can easily carry out an assassination or an attack on people coming to vote on the ground, right? So the soldiers are there for the protection of their own family members, their own neighbors, their own people. And also because, as I said, Donetsk was under attack from Ukrainian artillery and military the whole day I was there, right? So those soldiers are there to protect the civilians in Donetsk itself. I didn't, in all the drive from the border to Donetsk, I saw Russian troops at the border, but once we were in Donbass, I didn't see them. So this idea of kind of Russia completely swamping the Donbass and occupying the territory there is also a massive exaggeration by the West to justify, of course, the Ukrainian war crimes against the people of Donbass. And I'm pretty sure Wyatt will also confirm that, as will Eva. But as I've completely forgotten what the question was, sorry.
Oh no, I was asking to you about Moscow's kind of mood.
Yeah.
About just the escalation of the Western, rhetoric about nuclear.
Yeah, I mean, most people I spoke to were fairly sober about the whole thing and just said, as from a Russian perspective, they don't want to go nuclear. Again, Putin's words were taken out of context, because what he actually said and what he's been saying all along is, if the West pushes us, we have no option but to respond. And at the weekend, they bombed, one of the most important bridges for Russia and for Crimea. And so, of course, there was going to be a response. I mean, what do they expect? It's a terrorist attack on a civilian infrastructure, right? What is Russia going to do? It's not going to sit back and not respond. And this is the thing. Now the West is dealing with a country that can respond, and that's the difference. When it was bombing Libya and Iraq and Syria,
and Afghanistan,
right? There was limited response because all of them are relatively weak nations. I'm not wanting to patronize those nations at all, because in Syria the resistance here has been extraordinary. But compared to Russia, they don't have the resources, they don't have the manpower to be able to respond in the way that Russia is responding to Western hegemony. And this is why, we're in shock in the West, because finally we have an enemy that is able to respond proportionately to the Western aggression.
And, and that's interesting that you said that, because yes, we're seeing the pushback happen in real time. And